keep talking,
Okay.
but hold on, I gotta go over here to Facebook because it does this weird thing where it doesn't like to make it immediately go live. Hold on. No, 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 no. That's not what I wanted to do.
Oh my god, the music stopped back there. So hopefully the dogs don't get crazy. I'll mute my mic if the dogs get a little crazy.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's see. Edit audience, public, save. There we go. Okay. And it looks like we are live and it is sharing. Do me a favor, go double check. If you can take a peek at my Facebook page, make sure you can see it live.
Okay, hopefully you don't lose me.
Ooh.
Oh, no, you're still there. Okay. Oh, I forgot I gotta use your Goodman name. I like that profile picture. Come on, woman.
Thank you.
We are live, yes. I'm
sweet.
That's ironic. It's just a black screen on me.
Oh my gosh!
Ah!
It's a man, Maury!
It's a man, Maury!
Oh my goodness. So we're gonna hang out and just kind of see like who joins us.
On my end, so I assume you see all the numbers and the stuff, and I have to switch over to chat.
Oh, Derek just popped on. He said, "Hey."
Derek. Oh, there I can see. Okay, I see a little bit of something.
Okay, and let's open this. All right. And can I share this? Well, I assume folks can see it. Yep. Okay, so we're good. Ta-da! So while we're waiting for folks to come in, we have to, of course. Oh, where'd you go?
Oh, sorry, I'm here. I was gonna share it to my page. There we go. I was like, I guess I could share it.
And make sure that it's public and not private.
The post?
Yes, like no, yeah.
My personal page is private, but Gizele's is public.
Fabulous. Okay.
One time, so I gotta be on the low.
Hey, Kyra, miss you too, baby. Yes, we're serving school teacher Sally Jesse Raphael realness.
Yes,
Mama. She went from a woman this morning to like Mimo.
Oh.
So I thought it would be fun to kind of rehash like how you and I met, particularly since the contest is coming up. And like that's probably one of my favorite drag stories in many years is our interaction backstage.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I just remembered.
Oh gosh, that was so wonderful. For anybody that has no idea what we're talking about.
Well, the whole day.
Yeah.
Because remember what happened to me?
Remind me. What happened?
Remember I had food poisoning the whole day. And remember I kept having Tatiana's debriefing to go throw up.
Girl, I did not realize that happened to you.
Oh yeah. What's his face? The former Mr. Gay America. He was he went and got me some Alka-Seltzer and stuff. Yeah, I had to keep going because remember I was sitting there. I think you were.
You did tell me backstage that you had food poisoning. That you were
like, I was next to Ebony and you weren't next to me, but I remember I was just starting to get hot and had to go to the bathroom, and then I was like, oh Lord, here we go. And I felt bad that morning too. But yep, that was a day. That was
yes. Well, and amidst all of that, you've got me over here struggling to get a damn dark brown contact in to do an illusion. Can't get it in. And with food poisoning, you turn and you're like, Queen, come here.
Yes, because you were using that little
the tool that's supposed to work.
I was like, I don't know what this is because I just throw my contacts in there. So girl, just my hands are clean, open. I
Open.
got it in there really quick too.
Oh my gosh, I was so appreciative. But it was just like one of the coolest, sweetest
Yeah.
moments. And it was like, yeah, and then, heard you sing and was like, good Lord. And she's
Oh.
talented. My Lord.
I
She's nice and talented.
tried
I
to be.
live.
I'm
Do
a very
what?
thing.
Oh my goodness. So we are here we'll go ahead. Shall we dive in? We got few
Yeah.
viewers. So we're here to talk about sexual health. And I figure I love it. Let's get sexual. And basically, you and I had talked ahead of time that we would kind of approach this like I would be talking about it from the mental health vantage point. You're talking about it from the public health vantage point. So share a little bit with folks that are watching this or watch this in the future, what you do on a regular basis.
Okay. So for the past 12 years, I have worked in public health, mainly sexual health. I started out as an HIV STI prevention counselor back in 2011. And then I went on to start working at the Oklahoma State Department of Health in 2021, where I moved into the surveillance end, where I get to do all the statistics and things and the behind the scenes investigations that go on that a lot of people don't know. Well, they know it happens, but how it goes on.
Well, tell them a little bit about that, like, sir, because a lot of people don't even know what surveillance is or how that
Yeah.
goes.
So surveillance is basically where all the numbers get tracked.
Mhm.
And beyond just looking at the numbers and seeing that, oh, this was somebody that has this STI or whatever, there is a lot of investigation that goes into effect to make sure that it's a case, because a lot of these STIs, they linger and it may not actually be an active infection. So what I did was I was a field surveillance specialist, specifically for hepatitis. That's hepatitis C and B, because those are the ones that are usually in sexual health. And I would be behind the scenes and contacting providers to make sure, is this a new case? Is this an old case? Is something chronic? Is this actually an infection? And then moving it along, usually like with syphilis, an investigation will go to our disease intervention specialist, and HIV that goes to disease intervention specialist. They're contacting people and their partners and making sure that people are getting tested and getting treated. Um, Hepatitis is so different, and gonorrhea and chlamydia, they're all different, but that's what surveillance is. It's just investigating, and once we figure out something's a case, that's a number. We add it to the database, and at the end of the year, when you get all those statistics and those charts from the state and the CDC, that's what all the surveillance does. It was,
Mhm.
I will say this, it was definitely uh, a big leap from prevention side, because all I knew was, you know, client contact and counseling people and talking to people face to face. So being on the surveillance end was so different. But I'm so glad I got that experience for the past 2 years.
Yeah, no, because I had shared with you before that I had been on the prevention side when I first started working in the human services field, and that really was my experience, was having those conversations with people and being that bridge into care if somebody was HIV positive, or really any well, we didn't test for other STIs at the time, but we referred if there was a need, to the health department. But one of the things the two things that kind of pop into my brain, just on this topic, as a mental health person, so I'm a therapist, and then I also teach psychology and human services courses. But from my vantage point as a therapist, particularly whether it's marriage counseling or working with somebody individually, sex is always a topic that comes up. Either people aren't having enough, or their partner wants too much, or they're not being honest about what they're doing, where, with whom. And, and there seems to be so much shame around the topic, and even just talking about what you like with with your partner, potential partners. And then it's also seems like, just from the healthcare vantage point, that there's not really a concerted effort from a lot of like family care providers, what have you, like, let's normalize this conversation and everybody get tested on a regular basis. What are your thoughts about that?
There is definitely what was the word I was looking for? Uh, Pushback, I would say. Not necessarily pushback, but from the provider side, it's hard for people to access those resources to find somebody to talk to about their sexual health because of, a great deal of our country is rural. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't really have providers that are specializing in sexual health, and they don't really practice that in medical school, from what I've gathered, especially on other surveillance in and actually talking to providers. Um,
Wow.
Health tends to be the back of even the provider's mind, let alone the person's mind, and that's what I picked up on, especially here in Oklahoma. Even if they go
Since
down
the
that.
contest is coming up.
Oh, sorry. Did I hear something?
Uh-oh, what'd I do? What'd I do? Sorry.
Okay.
No, keep talking. Keep
Okay.
talking.
Or even if the provider does speak on the sexual health and provide testing, a lot of times, if a person was to be HIV positive with their provider, they're not going to go too in depth with that referral or gathering those resources that person needs. And a lot of times, a lot of people find out their status at non-traditional places, not their provider or not at a sexual health clinic. They might find it out at the plasma clinic or a blood donation place and find out there. And then they get lost in the sauce there.
Mm-hmm.
And, I talked to whenever I was a counselor, I always talked to people about whether they were having these conversations with their friends if they weren't having it with their partners, and I find that a lot of even circle of friends don't talk about it. Even circle of friends that are maybe even sexually active with each other, they don't have the conversation outside of the bedroom. I found.
Wow. So like even not even talking about like so friends with benefits
Yeah.
like so like I think me and maybe a lot of people might have the assumption that people in the LGBTQIA community might be more comfortable talking about
Mhm.
sex or things of or sexual health, etc. But maybe that's not always the case, like particularly where STIs are concerned.
Yeah. I feel like the only time that sex even comes up is actually when they're in the bedroom. And there's not really much talk in the bedroom when you think about it. So that usually is how people get down the road and get to a sexually transmitted infection, because they didn't have that conversation beforehand about the practices that they're about to partake in.
Mhm.
That's what I've learned and found.
Mm.
One thing I've
Hold on
learned.
one sec.
I'm sorry.
We've got a comment. I think it's totally opposite because of prejudice. Can you say a little bit more about that in the comment? Hello, Ariana, aka Yuri. Can you say a little bit more about which thing you meant? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, dear. I just
Oh,
wanted to grab onto that comment. But continue. Go ahead.
I kind of lost because that stood out to me. Oh, I was also going to touch on the fact that, and you talk about mental health. I've seen a lot of times, we don't talk about how people use sex as a coping mechanism as well when it
Listen,
comes to mental health practice. You're not necessarily having sex with your partner or a friend. You're just having a bunch of one night stands, which is not bad, and there's no shame in it. Is, are we being safe when we do this? And usually, security is kind of in the back of the mind when it comes to mental health and sex as a coping mechanism.
yes.
I was going to read that condom. Are you read a condom comment?
Well, no, well, it's interesting. So one of my areas of expertise is addiction. And, anytime you say that, people immediately think law and order. They immediately think things that are illegal. They don't think about the reality that addiction is essentially mental illness revolving around pleasure. And so sexual, compulsive sexual behavior and sexual addiction are very real, very prevalent in our community, particularly around the topic of chemsex, which is, of course, mixing methamphetamine and sexual behavior, in particular, methamphetamine. And And it creates this co-occurring process that can end up being super destructive. So I see, so Yuri and Jayla both are talking about people not being honest about their statuses because there's still a stigma, which I'm so this is where my brain goes with that, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. That we know now that if someone is being tested regularly and they happen to find out that they're positive and they be on medication on a regular basis, then there is almost no chance that they will pass that infection on. If we're talking about HIV, there's almost no chance, including if somebody is on PrEP. It's very unlikely that they will become infected. That it's really people that don't know their status that tend to transmit the virus or other STIs because they have not made that step. Is that your observation as well?
Most definitely. More often than none, when somebody does happen to pass the HIV on to somebody, it's because they didn't know, because they didn't get tested. But that does go back to the prejudice and the stigma. Why
Yes.
getting tested? Because of that stigma. I remember back in the day, I would say about 10 years before I even got into this field, the phrase was, I'd rather not know. I felt like I used to hear that all the time. You hear that, and I haven't heard it much anymore, but I feel like that still might be the case also. Some people rather not know or not have those conversations. But then going into the fact, when we talk about undetectable, meaning untransmittable, there's also this idea that because you're undetectable, that you don't have to have that conversation with someone, which, and that's a slippery slope as well, because and I don't know how do I say this right, because even though you're undetectable during that screening, that doesn't mean you're undetectable that next day. I mean, for the most part, you are, but also you have to give that option up to the partner and not make that decision for them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I think
that, but I was hinting at the fact that a lot of people don't feel like they have to have that conversation if they're undetectable. I found that as well.
Yes, yes. Well, and what I think, and so of course for my generation, I came out in 1995, and so the retroviral medications didn't come out till 93. So we lost an entire generation. And in North Carolina, the mid 90s are really when it was really, really severe cases of, AIDS diagnoses, etc. And so there was so much fear around sex and around testing and all. Like the show Pose does an excellent job of demonstrating what that was like. Whereas now there's sort of this interesting way that things have morphed about it, just like you said, that people are kind of like, well, I'd rather not know, and if I do find out, like, I'll be fine. And I keep coming back around, like, just from the mental health vantage point, that what keeps us from normalizing a conversation about sexual health, period. Like, I mean, and we know the answer. It's providers that are judgmental. It's like medical doctors that don't want to make that a normalized part of their practice of testing their patients at every physical for STIs as well. People are afraid that it means that there's something wrong or bad or negative about them, or where they're concerned. And that seems to be the case with really any STI. I had a client that I worked with that had was it chlamydia or syphilis? I can't recall which one it was. But the amount of anger, guilt, shame, all of those feelings, and what kind of made a really powerful impact was, well, what if you got a cold from making out with somebody? Would you still be this mad?
Right.
No, I mean, of course, I'm not comparing HIV to a cold, but an STI that is easily dealt with an antibiotic is kind of like, would you have that same level? And they were like, no, I don't guess I would. And I wonder what keeps us in that lane of that intense fear and shame about it.
Right. There's also no conversations at home too. at the pivotal age of adolescence when these conversations should be being at home with your parents,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the Bible Belt and rural states, you know, those conversations aren't happening. So you go out and you have those conversations with your friends, if you have those conversations with your friends. So you grow up not having those conversations, and then when you become an adult, you don't know how to have those conversations. You don't know if it's okay to have those conversations, because free will is something I think people forget that they have, and the liberty to be their own identity because of how we're raised. Everybody feels like they should be, they're accustomed to, you know, whatever they were taught growing up. And they're not learning this kind of stuff in schools either. At least they're not learning it, sexual health in schools in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it is in North Carolina,
Yeah,
but
listen, the model continues to be the heteronormative model
yeah.
about sex and sexuality and sexual health, that sex is for reproduction, that sex is something that, you know, heterosexual people do. And of course, we're not even going to get into the conversation that the overwhelming majority of anal sex is had by straight people, not by gay people, you know. Yeah, that's very, but what's fascinating to me about this, and you and I talked a little bit about this as well, you know, just from our own conversations with sex workers, you know, and, you know, other folks, you know, out in the community, et cetera, and from testing and counseling, the reality of what sexual behavior happens in our communities is very, very different from what is often projected. You know, it's very, like, again, that heteronormative model is very projected, you know, but in reality, a lot of people are not necessarily adhering to that, you know, and so it's just interesting to me that we can't, I mean, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Why we don't have a frank, honest conversation about it. But it's interesting to me, you know, kind of seeing behind the curtain that a lot of that is not really the way things are.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of like, you know, obviously I find myself, you know, from the therapist vantage point, doing a lot of work normalizing what people's desires, assuming, of course, that they don't harm themselves or others, normalizing, you know, testing, etc., normalizing moving into non-traditional relationships if that's what works for them and doesn't harm anyone.
You know what's funny about that? And we talk about non-traditional. You know, a lot of the heteronormative aspects of sexuality and sexual identity have carried over into our LGBTQ plus community, because nobody's normalized, you know, like being attracted and having sex with who you want to have sex with, regardless of anatomy or gender or things like that. And I had this conversation with a friend a long time ago about what they defined as a traditional uh, gay couple, which is, you know, two cis men that are together, and that's just not the case. And that has yet to be. That's still the norm, or that's still the tradition of, you know, gay culture,
Mm-hmm.
but the tradition of like queer culture, because we know that it doesn't have to be cis and cis. It can be trans and cis. It can be non-binary and trans, you know, and a lot of people have not had those conversations either.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that comes from a place of people really, really wanting to um, latch onto specific labels, titles, ideologies? What are your thoughts?
Most definitely. I think, and I, like I said, I think it carries all on from that heteronormative
Mm-hmm.
aspect. And
You know, it's interesting because I part of my journey on a regular basis is I'll watch both conservative and liberal media. You know, I try to get a balance.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I feel like it's my responsibility as a teacher that I try to get as much information from both conversations. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole of conservative LGBTQIA talking heads, and it was fascinating, the responses and reactions on this very topic
Mm-hmm.
that were very, like, angry. Most of them were older, but very angry, very frustrated that, you know, no, it's this is this, and if you're with, you know, this person, then this is not your orientation.
Yes.
You know, that that it's very, very focused on that there was a term that I had not heard before, genital preference.
Okay.
That this term was brought up that in reference to sexual orientation. So, for example, if a cis woman is a lesbian, and she would absolutely not date a trans woman because she's only interested in being with a woman that has a vagina, that the term for that was, genital preference.
Okay.
And this woman was very angry about that because she was like, no, I am interested in women, and trans women are different than cis women. And this is who I'm interested in. That's what makes you a lesbian. And it was just a really interesting dialogue. I don't know where we'll end up with that, honestly. What do you think?
I think that that's oh no, not my phone's dying. I have a charger right here. I believe that the conversation was approached in the wrong way. And there's still language to be discovered on that. Like, I can't say whether I'm opposed or for that genital preference, but that is honestly, we don't talk about that because when we talk about preference and sexual identity and sexuality, we don't talk about there being a preference when it comes to a specific genital. It doesn't. I don't. There's not a right or wrong answer to that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean that the woman is attracted to who she was attracted to, and what genitals they're attracted to. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, maybe the way she approached it.
Oh, it was very like, yeah.
That doesn't not because if there is a cisgender woman with a transgender woman, if they decide that they're lesbian, they're still lesbian, and that's how they identify. That is the problem there. It's instilling this ideal that taking somebody's identity from them. And that's what a lot of what we're fighting today on all kinds of subjects,
Mm-hmm.
Who are you to say that someone's not a lesbian because they're with a transgender woman? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All the time. As my husband is trans, he's openly trans, and I get that all the time. It's mostly from the straight community. Oh, you're not gay. You're with you're with somebody. You know what I mean? I don't want to dive into that, but I get that so much. And one time it was actually a friend of mine who was doing it jokingly, but it was to the point where I was like, "Hey, that's not okay. I don't need you to be doing that." And they were so apologetic. And all it takes really is to have those conversations. And
it's interesting. So, like, the way that I tend to walk through. Oh, you okay?
I'm here. Oh, sorry, I was putting my charger up.
Oh, you're good.
So,
like, the way that I tend to walk through this with students is, so sexual orientation is who you are physically, psychologically, and emotionally attracted to. Happens in your brain. We don't pick it. Is what it is. And sexual identity is the way that we label that orientation. So, bisexual, homosexual, pansexual, heterosexual, however, like, you define that, it's ultimately but the orientation piece is much more spectrum oriented than a lot of people are comfortable acknowledging or recognizing, I think. And then you have the part that everyone focuses on, which is the behavior. Mm-hmm. And listen, if I were to, be with a cisgendered woman right now, which, I have not been, but if I were, I would still identify as gay,
right.
That behavior would not change what my primary orientation is. Just like if a guy experiments, this is something that happens a lot with heterosexuals, is if a man experiments with another man and it's like, no, not for me, all of a sudden you're gay.
Mm-hmm.
That like you can go just as far as a prison to see that behavior can happen that is separate from identity and orientation. What it feels like from this conversation is that really the page is that it's not necessarily helpful for us to try to box people in.
Right.
That people enjoy what they enjoy, love who they love, and that's okay. Like, why does this matter?
Yeah, what you
Like,
ain't
why does it matter so much?
My mother always says, I'm not the headboard of the pillow.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. You know, because it does, like, and particularly too, when you see a lot of conservative media having this conversation, I'm like, why are you so concerned? You
Why?
not getting under my skirt? Like, calm down.
You're not there in the room watching us. Why are you so concerned?
Because they want to be.
I know they want to outlaw so many things. You know, they're criminalizing STIs in Oklahoma as we speak. I mean, there are laws already in place, but they're getting worse now.
Say more about that when you say criminalizing STIs.
So the way it's written also is basically if someone were to give someone an STI, they would get a felony. They'd be convicted of a felony for that if they gave it to them purposefully. But how do you gauge that? How do you prove that? And the way it's written also is basically if you give yourself an STI knowing somebody else had this STI purposefully, it's a felony. It hasn't passed just yet, but
I don't understand how you would even really rationalize or think that through. Like,
right. They just love to be in our bedrooms.
I mean, you know, I don't know what the laws currently are on the books. I know at one point in this area in North Carolina, if you infected someone with HIV and were aware that you had it, and if they were to say that they did not know, that could be a felony.
That definitely is still a thing. I know here in Oklahoma it is, and I think you have to do about 10 years of prison time. But I think that also, I don't think it's just HIV. I think it kind of goes across the board on a bunch of diseases if you knowingly.
Yes. Well, I mean, and again, it's like, how do you prove knowingly? Like, you have to, like, you weren't in the bedroom when tab A ostensibly went into slot B, or if you were scissoring, you know, whatever, you know, you weren't in the room. So how do you know what was said and what wasn't said? It's he said, she said.
And that conversation is so hard to have because, you know, so many people want to condemn people, you know, that they believe knowingly spread a disease to somebody. But, and I'm like, and when it comes to, I'm sorry?
No, could you imagine on this same, and again, I'm not comparing, like, I realize this is apples to oranges to some extent.
Yeah.
But could you imagine if, you know, like, particularly during the pandemic, etc., if people that flat refused to wear masks, if they were carted off to jail?
Okay.
Could you, like, this is, to me, it's that level of y'all, and truly the same people screaming and yelling that were screaming and yelling about wearing a mask for public health are the same people that are like, if you pass an STD, do not pass go, do not collect $200, you go to jail. I'm like, listen, we need less of this fear and fear mongering so that people will take their sexual health seriously.
Right.
You know, like,
it's going to further keep people from getting tested.
Yeah.
I don't want to find out, because if I find out and then that blah, 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 this could happen. I might go to prison because of this. If somebody, you know what I mean? Because what's to stop somebody, say somebody went and got tested, they find out they had gonorrhea. They tell their partner, like, hey, I ended up getting gonorrhea. For all that, they might go off and be like, oh, you knew you had gonorrhea all along. And then they call the cops on this person and bibbidi bobbidi boo.
Well, hopefully it won't go anywhere. Hopefully it will fail. I mean, if not, like, I can't imagine how they're even going to successfully, you know, I can't even imagine how they're going to successfully prosecute or do any of that. Like, it's so he said, she said. I cannot even imagine how that would play out. But segueing a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that the language of sexual health has changed a lot. Can you speak a little bit more to that? What's the language that people need to know? I'm also gonna after we talk, I'm going to share the link for the CDC. But for anybody who wants to know, you can go to gettested.cdc.gov and enter your zip code, and that will show you what's near you for STI testing.
And a lot of times, also, I would say on the get tested thing, a lot of times there is a way to find out how you can get resources to get condoms and lubricants and things from your local health departments and things like that too.
Oh, awesome.
As far as language goes, I don't know all the language, but what I do know is we are moving, which we should have done this a long time ago, is to moving from dehumanizing language and destigmatizing language, less stigmatizing language. When it all started, I think of a few years back when we started to change the language from an HIV infected person. Why does it sound like that? You know what I mean? And changing it to a person living with
HIV.
Yes. We started changing things to, changing the term disease to an infection, because disease is a very stigmatizing term. Because who wants to say that they have a disease, And one of the newest things that I've heard is the language around unprotected sex, and how we've segued into condomless sex, or sex without a condom, or safe sex, less stigmatizing and dehumanizing language, because nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, I had unprotected sex, because what does that sound like?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think that's a great direction.
And not all condomless sex is unsafe also,
Right.
Having condomless sex doesn't mean you weren't practicing safe sex. You know what I mean? With PrEP out there,
Sure. And of course, it obviously goes without saying, but I'll share for folks that are watching, PrEP doesn't protect from other STIs, but nonetheless, particularly if you're, with a partner that you're with on a regular basis and you're fairly comfortable about who you've been with and who you haven't, like, a condomless sex is not quote unquote. But I think even as you are sharing, and I hadn't really thought about it, but the term of safe, unsafe, our brains immediately go into that fear place when our fight or flight mechanism, and that verbiage creates more fear and more shame around sex when, which obviously can be problematic for people.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the things I thought would be fun to kind of like, as we sort of land our plane with our conversation, is talking a little bit about like other things that are, about preparatory or safer sex practices, etc. Things that are, maybe some of the like quote unquote spicier things that people don't necessarily know or think about.
Yeah.
So the first thing that like comes to my mind is like preparatory things for somebody that's having oral sex. What are some wise things to be considering where that's concerned?
Don't brush your teeth before or after oral sex.
Really?
At least not within, I think, 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
When you brush your teeth, it inflames your gums a little bit, and that opens up the mucous membrane and all that. So it's easier to pass an STI through oral sex if your whole mouth is inflamed.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really
Pop a mint or something. It's also kinky. It also cools it off. What is it called? There's a term for it when they're like somebody has a mint and they're giving somebody head. There's a name for it. I'm gonna look.
I mean, I remember I remember that from back in the day,
Yeah.
But, I'm a mama and a wife. She don't have sex. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really just
kidding. I learned also this isn't for oral, sorry, I'm segueing into anal. When they were talking about what are the best practices for lubricant or flushing out your ass, is glycerin suppositories.
Really?
Yeah.
I had always heard that using just using lukewarm water was best. Nothing
Yeah.
with any kind of a detergent property.
No vinegars.
Do what now?
No vinegars and things.
No, none of that. Like, and not using like Fleet is actually bad for you.
Yeah.
You know, those
And
that make you go. Yes, they're irritating.
imagine, because when you're using the bathroom, your ass gets pretty inflamed. I would hate to you done flushed everything's out, you done flushed it out and dried it all out, and then you're about to get busted. So painful. Clearly, I'm not a bottom from this language because I don't know, but it just doesn't sound. And I had IBS, so I could never know.
You're like, it's closed, exit only. Sorry. No, well, but I really think that this is probably valuable for people to hear and understand, because this is the part about sexual health that nobody talked about in sex ed, and even in our community, when we come out, it's a very, I mean, now you have the internet, YouTube, all of that, but I can think back, like back in the day, like it was of course word of mouth and things you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know to like search or look up sexual health, then you might not have this information.
Right.
Now, so, and based off of what I've always known or understood or read, that penetrative sex is the highest risk for something like HIV. So that's going to be, if you're the receptive partner, that's your highest risk. If you are receiving anal sex, receiving vaginal sex, and that's still the case. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And lower risks are things like oral sex, but not no risk. That's not no risk. It's lower.
Lower. Right.
Got it. Okay.
The safest is abstinence. And even breast milk has HIV
and spinal fluid, but I don't want to know what you're doing if you come in.
Rectal fluid too. Rectal fluid they added as a fluid to the list.
So if you are going downtown, for any of my salad bar fans, if you like the. If you like the salad bar, don't brush your teeth beforehand. Yeah, awesome. Well, girl, it has been so much fun chatting with you about all this. I so appreciate you doing this with me. I know you're getting ready to compete at Miss Gay United States. Are you getting excited?
I've been excited, but the other day when I decided on my Americana look, I got more excited because that was the category I was struggling with. And then I got the concept that I didn't have to construct myself. And that's really why I struggled on it, because I was trying to make something of my own, and it just wasn't coming out like I wanted it to. And I was like, wait, I got a better idea. And now I'm super excited.
That is awesome. I'm so excited for you. I will be absolutely cheering you on, rooting you on. Again, for anybody that's watched this far, we appreciate you joining us. You can go to gettested.com if you want to learn more about where you can find out more about sexual health in your local community. You can follow the lovely Gizele Monae on which platforms, my dear?
I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which I barely use, TikTok. I have a lot of TikTok content and threads.
That's where they can hear your lovely voice, isn't it?
Yes.
And listen, sister can flat sing her tits off. So go follow her on the tick of the talk. But thank you again, sweetheart, and I will chat with you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Yay, bye.